Okay, hi everyone. It is me, Flower Kisma, and I am setting up to go live. I'm just checking to see where my video is because I'm not finding it. I know it's here somewhere. There we go. I found it. Okay, so gosh, this is the weekly Faery with Teeth. Let me check to see if you can hear my hello. Can you hear my volume? Let's see. I don't hear anything. Do you hear anything? Hello? Hello? I don't know if it's if you can hear me or not. All right, so give me just a minute. I'm going to do a quick sound check. I don't know how I'm going to check this, but give me just a minute. Doesn't appear that my sound...
Okay, hi everyone.
There we go.
It is me.
Okay, you can hear me. That's a good thing. All right, so today is, what is today? Today is June, let's see. Oh my God, my old one is playing. It's June something or other. All right. I am the author of the Faery-Chronicles, and I am currently reading for you the Faery with Teeth, which is book one of the Faery-Chronicles. And I'm having a good time reading for you. Excuse me. So, we are currently right smack dab in the middle of the book. And where I'm at right now in Elder Scrolls Online. And before I start reading, I got to tell you something. Haven't been playing much of Elder Scrolls Line. The new Night Markets gameplay is cool. I really enjoyed the opening of it back in May, but the thing is it's really not developed for solo play, and I am predominantly a solo player. I do questing and stuff like that. And so I feel that in order to do if I can get up here now, let's see, can I jump? Yeah, I'm up here. All of the play in the new night market, it really is designed for group play. And I'm cool with that. I'm down with that. And the guild I belong to is wonderful. I just love them. I love the individuals I've met and have been playing with. But I just can't rally myself to go in. I just feel like, wow, it's always rough and tough and tumble. And I'm just a girl. I really am a girly. And the constant adrenaline battle, honestly, if all truth be told, is not me. And yeah, it's just not me. Yeah, so what can I say? I don't know what to say anymore. All right, let's just come over here and look down upon what, I don't know. See, I'm kind of out of touch with even my house. This is as good an image as any. Let me make myself disappear out of the picture. Okay, that's so pretty. All right, my friends. Lo and behold, Lauren is here. She hasn't been around lately, so welcome, Lauren. Nice to see you tuning in. So, anyways, I am going to get going. And for some reason, it's showing a different image on my screen. It's showing me it's replaying last week, which is not what I'm doing. I don't know why it would be replaying something. All right, anyways, here we go. I'm going to take off and begin reading. So, continuing on page 185 with the fourth hour dreams. Vivian smiled sadly at Kian as she looked at him over the breakfast table. Her mind was still a jumble with the fourth hour dreams and fleeting thoughts which seemed pleased to tease her as they dashed in and out of the darkness and golden sunshine of the inner landscape of her mind. Fleeting thoughts of how it was impossible to measure the mortality of love, especially when she insisted on flattering it with infinitude, or thoughts in which she compared such love to the enduring sands of the desert, the green velvet hair of the grass, or the curling endless waves of the sea. She became strangely disquiet as she reached for a slice of the thick brown bread at the same time Kian did, and their hands smashed together. The touch of his skin made her cringe at the impossible dreams that boldly forced themselves on her mind, pushing hard to break free, escape the boundaries of her mind, to find reality in the physical world by becoming flesh and blood. Kian laughed, making play at grabbing the bread before she could. His smile disappeared as he noticed her mood. "Are you all right, love?" he asked. "Too many dreams," she said. Her words held double meaning, as did all their words to each other. Kian smiled at her, an unexpressed trouble in his eyes, darkened underneath with circles from tormented sleep, weary-edged and lacking their usual luster. Vivian wiped her mouth with the blue cloth napkin, placed it gently beside her plate, the food barely touched, and left the breakfast table without looking back. She sought the comfort of the cold outdoors, the horse corral drawing her to its clover-laden green. A cold wind blew, and the skies had clouded over since coming to Loch Gur. The lovely warmth of Beltane had left their world. Why Vivian had come outside, or what Vivian searched for, was beyond her grasp, although that is what she hoped to find. Something of the hour, some little mundane thing to hold on to for the moment, just a moment. That was all she needed. The same grounded feeling that Justin had given her the night before as she stood in the foyer hallway, still dazed, still crazed, feeling incompetent, and feeling as if she were going insane. Vivian needed that of which the very sound of his voice gave her. But her mind screamed aching with the deepness of emotion, overwhelmed with the memory of Ishnak and Loch Crew. It seemed to detach from her and become a fiend, laughing at her weakness, sneering at her struggle. Vivian paced, with arms hugging her own body as if attempting to comfort herself, unaware that Cian had followed her outside and stood leaning against the fence, smoking a cigarette and watching her, witnessing the cruelty of her torment. "I did not ask for this," she said through gritted teeth, arms dropping to her sides, hands forming into fists. "I did not ask for love. Why do you complicate my life?" Vivian stopped, faced a 10-foot hedge of strawberry trees. The leaves, dark green, long, leathery, and shiny, her back to the house and him. The thought that someone would walk out of the hedge a tiny hope. But no other-world being came to her side. "Get a hold of yourself now," she scolded herself. "Stop this ridiculous nonsense. Cian is your friend. That is all. Oh, God. Oh, God." The pain shot through her. She hugged herself again, curving over all the torment that had begun yesterday afternoon upon arriving in Lochgar, returning with a vengeance. At least of that Vivian seemed sure. Something was not right here. Forced her brain to identify that which she saw. Dew beads on green rounded leaves, with little green veins attached to sturdy stalks that fell into a knotted cluster at the base before invisible roots disappeared beneath the black, wet soil. Her fingers brushed the trembling leaves that now seemed fragile under her touch before sinking deep into the wet earth. She was a bad woman, a bad wife, a bad mother. Tears threatened to flow. Vivian squeezed her eyes shut. "You may not come." She forbade the tears. She forbade any sign of further weakness. To become such would mean to surrender and lose the battle that raged inside of her. On one side, the devil that enticed her with visions of Cian's warmth and the argument of "why not?" And on the other side, the angel, the sad, forlorn angel, who stood unable to utter one word, just a pathetic look on its cherub face, a pitiful look that made her feel disgusting, remorse for even having remotely allowed herself such attraction. Her arms wrapped tightly around her torso again. "I will hold you, comfort you," they tried to reassure her. She stood, feeling immobile, unable to go on, to endure another second of sentient being. Was this the ageless struggle? To be loved, to love, to find security, and then to find another love, and in that finding to hunger for it like a vampire must hunger for blood. Was this the feeling behind all the sorrowful tales of Ireland in which a love triangle existed? Of course not, she admonished herself. Those were just myths based on fictional characters. Young women betrothed to older men they didn't love. Young women in love with a much younger man she should have the right to love. But her love was just plain adulterous. She was a married woman. She had a child. She was supposed to be able to control her passions, be complete and satisfied with her own husband. And she was. She really, really was. Justin had been, was still the love of her life. He had taken her to that other place where she had once touched heaven, had made her heart well up with such emotion as she'd never felt, so very uncontainable and all-consuming that she had wept. He, thinking he had hurt her, withdrew and held her gently in his arms, apologizing over and over until she finally was able to speak and tell him, "You didn't hurt me," but that she had truly felt love for the first time in her life. God, God, she loved Justin so much, but there she stood, hugging herself in a horse corral, ready to explode and go crazy, standing at an unbearable breaking point caused by her own self-torture. She towed an invisible line, beyond which opened a portal in her mind. Without conscious effort, she stepped over that line, entering the threshold where all her pain and agony instantly slipped away. And she flew down a very long corridor into the stillness of inner strength. Vivian flew down that corridor and came to rest in the peace within her own hell. She straightened up, looked to the moody sky hanging over her like a wet blanket. She looked at the reddish, rough bark of the shrub wall before her and thought, "Bad land. Bloodland. That's what Loch Gur is." And she felt this truth radiating, swirling around her as if it were encasing her in a cocoon. "We won't work the land," she said to something invisible, some discarnate being she sensed standing on the other side of the hedge. "I promise. We won't work the land." Faery Chronicle entry 2.111.1. It was to me she spoke, as I watched in witness of her torment, not needing to stand beside her, wanting the protection of the strawberry tree hedge between us, the rough-skinned and round fruit, a rich red color, long since shriveled and dropped from the branches. Her spoken promise caused concern, for it meant that she might not accept the challenge, might not undergo the trial that the spirit of Banba, incarnate within her physical body, lying only half awakened, required in order to become fully an immortal consciousness within her soul. But there came no emotion, as is common with our race, no conclusion that her vow was good or bad. It simply was. The words had been spoken, the vibration uttered, and only the mortal before me could shift such magic, change her mind, change her action. Only she was in full charge, though Vivian fancied herself to be under the spell of Glamorry, suddenly accusing all her behaviour on fairy doings. The host knew, as Mocha understood, that one day Vivian would realize that we do not tamper with the human emotion, that it is simply a matter of human emotion, i.e., that humans are not able to deal with the dry and unemotionable tasks given them by the divine. Having made her promise, Vivian turned from the hedge and faced the house to see Cian standing there, looking in her direction. Well, there we have it. That is the first chapter of today's reading. So, how's everyone doing out there? How is everyone doing out there? This is really strange. Twitch is definitely acting up for me. I have it on my phone so I can check in, and it's indicating that it's not even doing its thing here. So I don't know. I do not know if it's happening or not. All right, well, what I'm going to do is just continue reading as if it's happening. Because I honestly don't know. I honestly don't know if it's happening. I'm trying to get to the chat to see. It seems okay. All right. For some reason, I can't see the video of it, so I'm hoping that the picture looks good. But I'm going to move locations, so anyways. All right. Moving on to a new location before I read the next chapter. Let's go over here under the willow trees and stare at the magic garden here because it's pretty. Let's see. The waterfall. Okay. This isn't much a vision. So let's go out here. And go down these steps because there is something down here. Oh. I'm ready for battle. This is pretty. Okay. All right, continuing on with page 19, Witness to Torment. Cian leaned against the rough fence that surrounded the castle cattle-holding yard. Cigarette smoke drifted around his head, his eyes firmly focused on Vivian. Since he'd known her, life had changed. Nothing seemed right. He felt less than satisfied. She made him feel good about himself and yet uncertain, as if he couldn't do anything right. He was afraid of her. Not that she could nor would harm him. No. His fear was over the uncertainty she made him feel, over the unquenchable thirst for her she conjured inside of him. She made him feel guilty when he hadn't done anything. But that was the problem, wasn't it? She made him want to do something. Cian took a drag and watched Vivian double over. His first instinct was to go to her, but he knew that would be an intrusion. Vivian was getting something straightened out. Cian figured it had to do with Loch-Gur. When should he tell her about the witch's coven? She'd flip over that one. Still, she needed to know, had a right to know, since she was working the land now in Ireland. He wondered why he hadn't told her yesterday afternoon when just the two of them were having tea. The vision of her sitting peacefully, the warmth of the afternoon sun baking her face golden, clouded his mind. God, she had looked so beautiful, so peaceful, finally. He hadn't wanted to rob her of that moment, nor himself if the truth were told. A cold wind swirled through the treetops and lashed at the side of his face. Bullocks, but it was going to be a cold day. Cian drew his shoulders up towards his ears and shivered, and half turned to go inside and fetch his jacket. He then thought better of it when Vivian suddenly squatted down, at first worrying that she had fainted. It was that movement that made his mind up for him. He had to tell her about the coven the minute she was finished doing whatever it was she was doing out there. And when she came back his way, he would stop her and tell her about the coven, tell her about the negative powers they were working, warn her about the dark power. Cian smirked at the thought of power. Everyone was in it for power, especially Isabel, and he was afraid to admit it, but Nigel as well. Vivian was in it for the power, but not for her own personal gain or use. No, it was as if she had been chosen for the power. Power was, after all, not available to everyone. Once the gods found a worthy component, That person was given access to unimaginable and unspeakable things. If the person was able to connect with those powers, Kian believed the gods would just sit back and watch, waiting to see how the mortal used it, waiting to see if the powers were used for personal gain or for the gods themselves. Vivian was worthy. She'd handled Lockcrew pretty well, which made him smile with pride. There was something about Ishnok Kian couldn't quite put his finger on. Something had happened to her there. He refused to consider the bard into the equation. He smiled, shook his head. Kian couldn't believe that he had told her he wanted to marry her and have 7 kids with her, even if it had been said jokingly. He had still said it in the bus as they headed back to the B&B after Beltane. Like a fool, he followed her around the Mullingar pewter factory. As she oohed and awed over the lovelies there, he had sniffed after her skirt like a puppy, teasing her about the children of Lear's statue. "That's a nice depiction of our kids," he whispered in Vivian's ear, standing as close to her as possible. The look on Vivian's face when she looked up at him made him feel sure she was what? Open to him? Felt the same way? The same way about what? The same way about what? Kian wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, refusing to go there. Instead, insisting on believing that he had seen her willingness, had witnessed his emotion written on her face. Vivian had looked so adorable talking to herself, deciding which present to buy for her mum's birthday. "Maybe I should just get this," she said to herself as he'd come up behind her. "Oh, no," he had teased. "Spending more of the money?" he asked playfully, leaning over Vivian's shoulder, meeting those twinkling green eyes, which seemed to focus on him so intimately. Vivian had leaned back against him, then turned so she could lay her head on his shoulder, snuggle under the crook of his arm. "I just can't make up my mind. Should I get the Claudia wall clock for my mom or this Claudia picture?" Before Kian could answer, Vivian grabbed his arm and pulled him after her. "This is for me," she said, cooing over it. "It will be my Ireland bracelet." Kian loved the smile she gave him and her lovely twinkling eyes as she held out the bracelet for his approval. He had never noticed how smooth Vivian's skin was until then, how soft it looked. She definitely took care of herself. Kian chewed on his bottom lip, remembering then how Vivian gently, playfully squeezed his arm before pushing him away. "Now go on and let me finish my shopping. You're no help." Turning back to her decision, Kian heard her soft sigh and felt himself harden. And the smell of her scent, the sweet smell of sweat and stale perfume, the clinging aroma of the shampoo she washed her hair in, the smell of the earth, of sage, the gorse bush, the smell of the green grass, and the fragrance of the air had suddenly overwhelmed Kian. He was acutely aware of all those smells rising from her, intoxicating him, that he had actually jumped when Vivian suddenly announced, "The picture! That's the one!" And then she was off just as suddenly to collect the item. He watched. He watched her for a little while longer before slipping outside to go to the bus where everyone sat in waiting. When shopping, Vivian was usually the last one to make her purchase. Everyone knew this, and no one seemed to mind. But that day, as Kian had stood looking after Vivian, he had become aware of the little details. The beauty mark-like mole on her upper lip, the curve of her neck, the way an obstinate curl insisted on tickling her eyes, almost as if it teased her, hoping to be touched by her hand, even if a quick shove away. After that, Cian began envisioning long walks with Vivian in the forest near his home, standing on the hill of Ward alone with her, watching the sunrise over the shore of Dervagilla, peering up at her over the top of a book on a quiet winter evening. Then she had flashed her green-eyed glare on him. "You still here?" she scolded. Cian had been sure he saw a hint of desire edging her lips as they curved into a soft smile, a smile for only him. The alarmed cry of a magpie shattered the memories. Cian rubbed his eyes. He leaned forward, arms resting on the top rung of the fence at Hilgar B&B, and lifted one foot onto the bottom rung. With head cocked to the side, he studied the small figure of Vivian standing with her back to him. She was facing a large hedge fence. No play today for his little priestess. Today she was in pain. Cian took another drag, slowly blowing the smoke out. Vivian turned and looked right at him, and it was then that Cian noticed Vivian was wearing jeans. Funny, he hadn't noticed that before. She rarely wore pants. He flicked the cigarette butt away and decided to go tell her about the coven. He thought maybe he'd also tell her how he felt about her. Ask her if she felt the same toward him. Ask her why in God's name she had written a poem for the bard and made Carla give it to him to take to him to Ishnok. Cian didn't move an inch because Vivian turned away, covering her face with her hands. Was she crying? The sound of a car engine brought both their attention to the end of the drive, where a white van turned onto it and rambled toward the farmhouse. Well, that's the second chapter for today. All right, so I'm probably going to read just one more chapter. And let me grab some water first. I'll go walk to another setting before I start. I hope your Thursday is going well and that you're enjoying it. My Thursday's been a wonderful day. I need to see myself. Okay, so here's a secret hideaway. People don't know it's there unless they are willing to investigate and go all the way over into this corner, and then voila, there are stairs or a ramp that goes up to this second level. The second level lets you really see the rest of the property. And then you can come over here, and there's a bench here you can have a seat on, or a bench here you can have a seat on, or a bench here you can have a seat on. I'll just sit here. Well, I don't know. Let me sit here and see what we see. That's a little pretty. Okay, so now I'm going to continue reading on page 195, and this is called The Geisha. The room was plain, light blue walls with one small painting of birds hung too high above the bed, the covers askew. Next to the bed was an oak night table with a jar-shaped lamp and dingy yellow shade, and beside this sat an electric clock. Vivian's own battery-operated alarm clock sat on top of this electric one, its multicolored flag wheel set to UK time so that the analog face of the clock showed the actual time, with a small digital inset about 3/4 down the face showing California time. Carla thought Vivian's room would be better than her own, and the plainness of it made her feel somewhat better for some reason. She sat in the only chair in the room, positioned by the lace-curtained window, which looked down on the rock drive. From where Carla sat, she had a clear view of Vivian out in the horse field. To see Kian, she had to lift up from the seat and lean forward. This morning, Carla would give Kian another note. Vivian's blue-green journal lay open on her lap as she copied another poem in black pen onto a piece of the fine linen paper. As she reread the poems, she began to think that maybe Vivian had written them for the fairy, and maybe a few for Justin even. She shrugged. It didn't matter. Carla figured that sooner or later Kian would open one and read its contents, or at least hoped that's what he'd do. She leaned forward, pushing up with her thighs so she could see out the window. She wanted to be sure Kian was still at the fence. The crown of his head came into view. Carla smirked at the bald spot on the top. She loved that he was going bald. How vain he was that he should grow his hair long, probably so he could brush the long bangs back over the thinning area so nobody would know he was losing his hair. Goddess, but she hated that man. Who did he think he was? Always standing by Vivian's side and sneering at her like she had no business to be so close to Vivian. Carla sat back and watched Vivian. Why hadn't Vivian asked her to go out there with her? It seemed obvious she was upset and was out there talking to the fairy or goddess, most likely goddess. Vivian had definitely become withdrawn, and that bothered Carla. That and the fact that Vivian no longer shared anything with her. It was all Kian's fault. The journal slipped from her lap and crashed to the floor. Shit, she said, leaning over to pick it up, and bolted upright as the honk of a horn blasted. A small white van pulled into the drive and headed toward the house. As it came to a stop, Carla could see Joe sitting behind the wheel. Shit, she swore a second time, returning her attention to the task at hand, and hurried to finish before she got caught. Joe expertly wheeled the 12-seater up the driveway. He waved to Vivian, who he thought was out for a morning walk, and grinned as she waved back. He made a face at Kian, who stood away from the fence and faced the van. "What you think of this?" he called out the window. "Old Joe comes through again," said Kian, nodding. "What's up with our bus?" "I've got Tommy McClintock working on it." He cut the engine and climbed out of the cab. The front door of the B&B opened, and Carla stepped out. In her hands she held a white linen envelope. "Where's Vivian?" she asked Kian, pretending not to know. She intentionally followed Kian's gaze. Vivian came through the corral gate and headed their way. "What's she doing?" she mumbled. "Thinking," said Kian, meeting Carla's eyes, then looking down at the envelope. "Is everything all right?" "No, I don't think so," replied Carla, smoothing her brown hair back and pushing a headband in place. "What's wrong?" asked Joe, a look of concern on his face. "Well, Vivian seemed distant at breakfast," commented Kian. "She's been out there a good 20 minutes pacing, talking to herself." "Or to Goddess," added Carla. "Most likely," said Kian. "Oh," commented Joe. "About what?" Carla and Kian couldn't help exchange a smile. "Now, if we knew that, we wouldn't be having this conversation now, would we?" Kian commented, searching his pockets. He pulled out the cigarette tin. He was aware of his filthy habit and how over the years he'd made a ritual of rolling cigarettes. Mostly it was a mode of self-comfort. Motto: when nervous or ill at ease, look at ease, roll a fag. Carla watched Kian's long, deft fingers hold a paper between them, sprinkle a pinch of tobacco over it, even out the herb, and slide the papers together. He brought the edge of the thin paper to his lips and slid it over his tongue, pressing it together before slipping each end between his lips to seal them shut. Cian looked down and placed the finished cigarette into the tin alongside 3 others. Ooh, it had been a busy morning. Well, Vivian walked past the group, glancing up as she passed and making an attempt to smile. "I'll be right out," she said, disappearing into the house. She moved slowly up the stairs. At the top of the landing, she came face to face with Donna. "Are we ready to go?" Donnie inquired stiffly, moving down to the next step. "My leg is bad today," she said in answer to Vivian's worried expression. I thought I heard the bus." "Yeah, it's here," said Vivian, putting on her best smile. We're ready to leave. I just forgot something in my room," she added, motioning for Donna to keep going. I'll be there in a minute, okay?" Donna grunted and tried to draw herself in to make room for Vivian to pass. She looked over her shoulder and watched Vivian go into her room before continuing down the stairs. Donna thought of herself as the eyes of the pilgrimage, the one who silently witnessed everything that went on behind the scenes, the keeper of knowledge. She thought Vivian looked tired and very sad. Things were obviously not going as planned, but then they never really did. This was Donna's 3rd trip with Vivian, and each one was just as exciting as the next, full of spontaneity and magic. But this trip, Vivian seemed different. She was just plain old sad most of the time, and that bothered Donna. She sighed and winced at the pain in her left ankle, remembering how it felt to be young and thin, with her whole life ahead of herself. Now she just felt old, fat, and on the home stretch. She chuckled to herself. How many years had she been saying that to herself? God, about 15, maybe even 20. Old age was a bitch, and her aging process certainly wasn't very pleasant. Still, her mind went back to Vivian. Something was wrong with this trip, and she was determined to find out what. Besides, she had plans to write a novel about her experiences in Ireland, and that included the pilgrimages with Vivian. A frown crossed her face. Well, she hoped Vivian wouldn't mind. Cian glanced at Joe and Carla. A heavy silence clung to them. He reopened the tin and took out one of the cigarettes and lit it. "Well, I'm going to see after a cup of tea before we head out," said Joe nervously, unsure of what was going on. He smiled at Carla and checked Cian's expression. "Right, then. I'll be out in a few minutes." With that, he strode off, disappearing around the corner of the house. Carla looked intently upon Cian. She smiled at his brown eyes. Turned to her. Without speaking, she held out the envelope. Cian lowered his eyes and read the words written on it. "A gaze," he said, squinting at Carla. "What's this?" "Vivian has realized she is hopelessly in love with the bard and is putting him under gaze," she said, hoping it didn't sound too contrived. "What the feck is going on here?" Carla had never seen Cian look so mean. She shook the envelope at him. "Take this," she insisted. "Vivian wants you to give it to the bard along with the other one. In fact, she may have more to give you by the time the pilgrimage is over." Carla eyed Cian to see if he was going for it a second time, and was aware she'd been holding her breath until she gulped in air, relieved when he snatched the envelope from her hand. "This is ridiculous," Cian mumbled, glancing down at the house. "What's she doing?" His eyes hit Carla with such force, Carla found herself taking a step back. Was that pain she saw registered in his eyes? She swallowed. "Hey, she asked me to tell you that she's putting you under a gauche." "What?" Carla took another step back. "She's putting you under gauche to be her messenger because she trusts you. She knows that you'll do this for her." Carla reached up and fumbled with the headband, keeping her hair off her face. "And as before, she wants you to know she doesn't want to discuss it. All right?" The front door opened. Donna hobbled toward the bus. From around the side of the house, Joe reappeared. Carla was relieved to see them both. "Claire and Michael aren't in the kitchen anymore. Don't know where they be," Joe said, genuinely baffled. "So we might as well be off," he said, stopping next to Donna and looking from Carla to Cian. Cian's cold eyes jumped back to Carla's face. She returned his stare, a cold, calculated look in her eyes. She snatched the headband from her hair and nervously pushed it back in place. Joe was sure he had missed something. He coughed into his hand, turning to Donna. "And how are you this morning?" "Stiff as a board," said Donna. "I'll go get Vivian," Carla said, turning. Cian shoved the envelope into a pocket. This chapter is still going. I'm just moving into another position so it doesn't boot me. As we know, I sometimes get booted from standing too long in one position. Well, inside the privacy of her own room, Vivian lay down on her unmade bed and stared at the cream-colored ceiling. Outside, the muffled voices of Cian and Joe filtered in. A soft knock came. The door opened. Carla stuck her head in. "Can I come in?" "Of course," said Vivian. She sat up and fidgeted with the buttons on her green blouse. "You okay?" Carla asked, noting the worried expression on Vivian's face. Vivian clasped her hands together and held them in her lap. She dutifully gave Carla her attention. "I promised Onya we wouldn't work the land," she said, a weary smile across her face. "Do you want to talk about it?" Carla asked, sitting next to her. Joe's laughter lifted their attention to the window. "We're so lucky to have Joe," Carla said. "Yeah," mumbled Vivian, who stood and went to the window. Below, Cian stood with his back to her. "And what about him?" she wanted to ask. Was she lucky to have Cian? She jerked away from the window. "I'm worried, Carla." "I know. And I don't know what to do, and I'm so angry." "Why?" She dropped heavily to the bed. "Okay," she sighed after a pause. "I went out there to get my head clear over Cian, get refocused on what we're doing here." "The sacred pilgrimage?" questioned Carla. Yeah, that and the magic. We're being played with. There's something going on. Out there, I heard very clearly that this area, that Lochgur is bad land, bloodland." "Well, what do you think that means?" The bus engine started. Carla went to the window and peered down through the lace. "Is Donna on board?" asked Vivian. "Yes," replied Carla, turning back to her friend and high priestess. Vivian would always be Carla's high priestess. She hesitated then, mentally configuring the story first and checking it to be sure it sounded lucrative before speaking it. Carla paused. Oh, she could lie all right. In fact, Carla had been clinically diagnosed as a pathological liar. Of course, she'd never told that to Vivian. How could she? I mean, what would she say? Excuse me, Vivian, but did you know I tell lies and believe them? Vivian, now busy with the last minute details, was oblivious to her mental battle. Carla coughed, glancing down at the van. Joe looked up to the window and winked. She smiled and waved back. Okay, listen, Vivian. Ah, she was a jumble of nerves. She always felt them when she was going into a lie. Vivian looked up from what she was doing, eyes intently on Carla. Carla moved to her, reached out and grabbed Vivian's arm. This is going to sound way crazy, she said. She had learned long ago to demystify the craziness of what she was about to say with that kind of statement. Well, I'm pretty sure about this, and trust me, I know that what I'm going to say is going to sound really far-fetched, but hear me out, okay? She leaned forward, peering into Vivian's green eyes, holding a steady gaze, not blinking to show she was lying. Vivian's brows furrowed with concern. She held a folded yellow rain poncho against her chest. Okay, she said. Again, Carla coughed, licked her lips, and continued. Kian and Joe are IRA. Vivian laughed. No, I'm serious, insisted Carla, to which the smile on Vivian's face dissolved into a blank expression. I've been observing them. Yeah, I've been observing them, their behavior, and well, actually, my suspicion began last trip, but I didn't feel confident to come forward with it until now. But I'm pretty sure that nothing really happened to the tires on the bus or to the engine even. I think it was a front. They were carrying IRA contraband, maybe even arms or explosives somewhere under the bus or something. Carla hesitated, stepping back to the window and looking down. Kian knows the best way to cover up would be to disguise it as the supernatural. Think about it, Vivian. Vivian sat down on the bed and stared at Carla. Think about it, Carla pressed again. Last trip they'd take us way out of the way to stop at some little store, which only the two of them could go into, remember? Vivian nodded, vaguely remembering the oddity of that day. Then, what about the time we sat in the lounge of the Earl of Kildare Hotel, and that couple came in and they acted like they knew Kian even though nobody spoke? Carla caught up in the momentum of her tale, grabbed onto the story, and sat down next to Vivian. The man went into the bathroom, and then as he walked past our table, he nodded to Kian, and you even said you thought he had made some type of hand signal. Vivian stared at Carla's face. The man and woman left, didn't they? Carla added. And as soon as they walked out, both, not just one of them, but both, Kian and Joe disappeared into the bathroom. And then what happened that night? Carla didn't wait for an answer. The hotel fire alarm goes off, and who jokes about it the next morning as being a cover-up? Joe, Vivian said softly. Okay, said Carla, believing she had Vivian convinced. So if nothing is really wrong with the bus, why would it need to be abandoned or left with a mechanic? She smiled, showing her teeth. When Vivian gave a deep sigh and shook her head, her interest appearing renewed in the rain poncho in her arms, Carla calmly laid a hand on her arm and leaned forward. No conclusions, she said. Let's just observe them. Watch and see what happens. Okay, I'll pay more attention to them, Vivian finally said. Carla stood up, greatly relieved, and moved back to the window. She pulled back the lace curtain. At the movement, both Kian and Joe looked up. Kian lifted his arms in the air, concern visible on his face. Carla smiled and held up one finger as if to signal they'd be down in 1 minute. Okay. Aside from my conspiracy theory, Carla said, watching as Vivian stuffed the rain poncho in her day pack and zipped it up, what's going on with the fairy? The energy here. Vivian stood and glanced about the room, not meeting Carla's eyes. You ready? She asked. Carla nodded and followed her from the room. Okay, all I know, Vivian admitted at the top of the stairs, a sound of defeat in her voice. All I know is we can't work the land, but Onya still wants to be worked, so we'll just visit Locker, and later this afternoon we'll go to Nakonya. Okay, Carla nodded, remembering the envelope and suddenly hoping that Kian would keep his mouth shut, wondering if she'd gone too far bringing in the bit about the geisha. Down below the front door stood wide open, framing Claire, who turned and smiled at the sound of Vivian and Carla coming down the stairs. Looks like a lovely day, Claire said, standing aside to let Vivian and Carla pass. Outside, a gentle sunlight had broken through the clouds. Your weather is so unpredictable here, said Carla as she stopped inside the foyer. Today it seems to be, the proprietress agreed. Then, off to Locker, are we? Commented Vivian, stepping outside. Kian turned and faced her. We're ready, he said with a stern face and angry eyes. I'll just be a minute, called out Carla. I want to give Bridge House a ring to let the group know we're on our way. Vivian nodded and crossed the drive to Kian. Joe stepped from behind the van. Well, what you think? He asked, motioning to the van. Not bad, she said. You're so reliable, Joe. Vivian gave Joe's back a pat. Thanks. A bashful grin creased Joe's face. He shrugged and fidgeted with the collar of his shirt, the leprechaun peeking out. What's the story with our bus? Vivian asked, glancing between Joe and Kian. My man is on it, Joe replied. I'll need to get back to him. I figure I'll drop y'all off at the lock and then go help him out. How long do you think you'll be today? Vivian took a deep breath, looking sharply at him. Carla's words replaying in her mind. Kian popped open the cigarette tin and met her eyes briefly. Vivian noticed a cold anger in them. Well, we can't work the land here, she said. I promise. So, no ceremony. She shrugged, looking back to Joe. We'll go to the cultural center, have everyone see the film and check out the museum, and then we'll go on a walkabout on Nakadun. I'd say about 2 hours. Will that be enough time? Perfect. Well then, all aboard, Joe announced. Vivian and Kian looked at each other, their eyes locking, a torrent of questions and unspoken words flowing between them, a flood of confusion. Kian stuck his hand in the pocket where he had stuffed the envelope. He pulled it out and he wanted to pull it out and shove it into Vivian's face and demand an explanation. He tore at the edge of the envelope, wedging a finger into the sealed opening and feeling the paper inside. He'd be damned if he had let her put him under a gauge to be her servant boy. Vivian shook her head sadly and looked to the corral. Kian, Locker is bad land. It's blood land, she said, then turned and climbed in the side door of the van. Okay, I think that's all I'm reading today. Let me do a quick time check. Let's see, yeah, it's 2:58. So I'll be stopping here today. I hope everyone enjoyed listening and relaxing or doing whatever it is you're doing. Thank you for tuning in, and I want to say to all of you viewers watching the replays on Twitch, thank you so much. I was pleasantly surprised to see how many people watched last week's episode. That was really nice. And thank you to those of you catching the replay on the YouTube channel. And for those of you here tuned in live or watching the live stream off my website, thanks very much. And have a great rest of your week. And I'll be here next Thursday. Same time, same channel. All right, everybody. Thank you so much. Take care. Bye-bye.